Group 8. Analysis of the political caricatures during the American period. Prepared by Laranjo
and Mabol.
The transition from the Spanish colonial period to the American occupation period demonstrated different strands of changes and shift in culture, society, and politics. The Americans drastically introduced democracy to the nascent nation, and the consequences were far from ideal. Aside from this, it was also during the American period that the Filipinos were introduced to the different manifestation of modernity like healthcare, modern transportation, and media. The post-independence and the post-Filipino-American period in the Philippines were experienced differently by Filipino coming from different classes. The upper Principalia class experienced economic prosperity with the opening up of the Philippine economy to the United States. But the majority of the poor Filipino remained poor, disparate, and victims of state repression. The cartoons or political caricatures are not only the opinion of a certain media outfits about the Philippine society during the American period, but also paint of a broad image of the society and politics under the United States. In the arena of politics, for example, we see the price that the Filipinos paid for the democracy modeled after the Americans. First, it seems that the Filipino politicians at the time did not understand well enough the essence of democracy and the accompanying democratic institution and processes. This can be seen in the rising dynastic politics in Tondo as depicted in the cartoon published by The Independent. Patronage also became influential and powerful, not only between clients and patrons, but also between the newly formed political parties composed of the elite and the United States. This was depicted in the cartoon where the United States, represented by Uncle Sam, provided dole outs for members of the Federalista while the Nacionalista politician looked on and awaited for their turn.
So, good day everyone. So, today we are in the GEC 105. I will discuss or discuss the discussion of Rich May, so all about the analysis of the political caricatures during the American period. But before that, let me have a review first. So, the transition from the Spanish colonial period to the American occupation period demonstrated different strands of changes and shifts in culture, society, and politics. So the Americans drastically introduced democracy to the nascent nation of and the consequences were far from the ideal. So let's continue. So the transition from the Catholic-centered Spanish-Filipino society to an imperial American assimilated one, and its complications were also depicted in the cartoons. One example is the unprecedented increase of motorized vehicle in the city. This is the when we call cartoons, it is the imitation. So when we American colonized the Philippines, one of the unprecedented is the increasingly motorized vehicle, the automobile vehicle, which is that we know that in that era only few that use in that motorized vehicle. But because of the colonization, because of the American period, the automobile increased fast, so that the lot of people use these motorized vehicles. So this automobile became a popular mode of a transportation in the city and led to the emergence of taxis. Yes, we cannot deny that in this automobile has a positivity impact in the society. We can easily pass way, or we can easily get or went to the place that we want to go in just a minute. That's because of the automobile vehicle. But because of the fast increasingly of people use the automobile, the traffic in the EDSA or in the road is we cannot surpass because of the increasingly of the motorized vehicles. So however, the laws and the policy implementation was mediocre. So this resulted in the increasingly colorlum and unlicensed vehicles transporting our people around the city. As I said earlier, because of the increasingly motorized vehicle, there is a lot of people who want to get that vehicle without in an illegal way, because as we know that if you have a vehicle, you need to have a licensed driver license. But because of the people who has a what we call negativity impact or negativity thought or idea, they undergo a illegal, which is unlicensed driver, which we know that even now they have a unlicensed driver but they are allowed to, but they are also in the road who will be using the motorized vehicle. It's because of the government. As we know that the rules governing the issuance of drivers was loose and traffic police could not be bothered by a rampant violation of the traffic rules. Because of the government, the rules that they implement was mediocre. They didn't lead properly the implementation or the rules that they have. So what is the sense of the rules if there is a lot of people who has the unlicensed vehicles or unlicensed vehicles? So the traffic police did not bother the rampant violation of the traffic rules, because also the traffic police doing that I license vehicles just to sell and have money. As we know that a lot of people want to get that automobile vehicle even though it is a unlicensed vehicle. So that's how the American period occupation in the Philippines. So another example is that what McCoy called sexual revolution that occurred in the 1930s. young people as early as that period disturbed the conservative Filipino mindset by engaging in the daring sexual activities in public spaces like cinemas. As we know that me as a Filipino, I am a conservative, but because of the American occupation, the conservative Filipino engage in that sexual activities in the public spaces like cinemas. So there is a possibility the conservative Filipino will be undergo or have a engage in that particular sexual activities because there are also a rampant or a lot of a young Filipino want to experience what is in the cinema. So that's why the conservative Filipino mindset engage in that sexual activities. Here, we can see how that period was the meeting point between the conservative past and the liberated future of the Philippines. So lastly, the cartoons also illustrated the condition of poor Filipinos in the Philippines now governed by the United States. So the poor Filipino was governed if you have no money, if you are not rich. So the United States governed the poor Filipinos in the Philippines. For example, a cartoon depicted how police authorities oppressed petty Filipino criminals while turning a blind eye on hoarders who monopolize goods in their youth warehouses. Let's assume it is a Chinese merchant. So, as an example, in the text that if you are a Filipino, a poor Filipino commit a crime, then you have no right or freedom. But the rich men, or they are in a blind eye on the hoarders who monopolize goods in their huge warehouses. Just like in the Chinese, because as we know, the Chinese is a businessman. They are rich because of their business. So, the other cartoon depicts how Americans control Filipino through seemingly harmless American objects by controlling their consciousness and mentality. Americans got to control and subjugate the Filipinos. So that is the analysis of the politics in the American period. So I hope you've been learned and stay at home. God bless everyone.